we tried last month, didn't go off quite as planned. But I did hear from quite a few of you saying that you were looking forward to this service, so no pressure, right? And just as a bit of background for the non-nerds in the crowd, maybe the 5 of you that didn't already know all of this. In 1964, which is incidentally when color television started gaining popularity in the United States, Gene Roddenberry proposed a new science fiction series to the NBC network about a crew of a starship whose mission it was to explore the universe. It was pitched as sort of a wagon train to the stars, but unlike its traditional counterparts, old black and white westerns, it felt like a transition, exploding with color and vision onto our television screens. Roddenberry's intent was to use the fantastic settings of the series to showcase very real and universal problems and themes, and to solve them with ingenuity and humanism. The series ran 79 episodes starting in 1966 and was canceled in 1969. A very small number by today's standards, as television shows these days tend to go on seemingly forever, maybe 7 years or more. But despite the meager number of episodes, the series had a dedicated fan base that welcomed it back with open arms in 1979. And the first of 11 movies, yes, for you purists out there, I do count the new one, was released, igniting the imagination of fans, old and new. The universe of Star Trek inspired 4 more series, plus an animated series. Many books, countless fan conventions, of which Mike was a part of one. And I've heard from at least one of you that you also did that a while back. And mountains of merchandise have been produced bearing the images we are all familiar with. The crew, the ships, the gadgets, the red shirts, and the Spock ears. So iconic and groundbreaking was this TV series that author Stephen Edward Poe wrote in his book, A Vision of the Future. The fact is, never in the history of any entertainment medium has there ever been a story, an idea, a situation, a set of characters, or a theme that has approached the magnitude or impact of Star Trek. In fact, it was the universal problems and themes that made it so enduring, despite the dated looks and cheapness of the sets. Very kitschy B-movie stuff, right? And some misfires on how future society might look. Miniskirts and go-go boots on Starfleet crew members? Come on. No go-go boots on me, no miniskirt today. It speaks to issues faced by every generation. War, prejudice, justice. It had characters that we could identify with, either by race or personality, and it became undeniably iconic and ultimately recognizable to fans and non-fans alike. Few things about the show, I think, are more iconic than the words that began every episode. And if you have a question, Mike, Jeff?
Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. Its 5-year mission to seek out new life, new civilizations, to boldly go where no man has gone before.
Does anyone else find these words inspiring? Do these words make you feel the excitement of traveling and discovering and meeting new challenges? You know, my favorite part in all of those few lines are the words, to boldly go. 3 simple words, but they are an effective reminder that the search for truth and meaning is not to be taken lightly or timidly. We should embrace it and be emboldened by it. I like to think of life as kind of like Star Trek, in that exploring is a necessary and vital part of what it means to be alive. I think it's a part of the UU experience to continually refine the meaning of this thing we call truth, and to ultimately be bold in the search. My favorite UU principle, same as Buzz, who said it a couple of weeks back, the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Now, because I was supposed to have said it first, he was copying from me. But whether or not we find that inspiration in our friends and family or in a television show, the important thing is that we find it. So when I first started coming here, about, maybe a year and a half ago, one of the initial things that struck me were the stories I heard from the people I was meeting. That they came here because they were looking for a community that was more aligned with their own belief systems. That they too were seeking a place to belong. Of all the stories I heard, the one that rang the most true with me was, I was a UU before I knew what a UU was. Anyone else have that experience? Yeah, I see a lot of you, huh? So you all understand what I feel. However, my rationale to me. I had no idea where the feeling came from. I kind of had to look inside myself a little bit. But I knew the feeling felt very, very familiar, like I'd seen it someplace before. Now, I grew up in Catholic churches, so I had not been to a UU church before I started coming here. So I thought, where did I see this before? Where had I seen a group of people who viewed themselves as on a journey, who valued diversity in both types of people and beliefs? What really was it that made me a UU before I was a UU? And being a nerd, I finally came to an unsurprising conclusion. It was Star Trek. Yes, I am in fact an unrepentant nerd. I'm an engineer and I teach physics. I couldn't deny it if I even wanted to. But it probably wouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that I'm a fan of Star Trek. I even toyed with the idea of calling the service Adventures of a UU Space Cadet. Now, I'm willing to bet at least one person in this crowd, one person, remembers when William Shatner had a guest appearance on Saturday Night Live and just is itching to quote him for me. That's okay. Do you want to do it, Colleen?
Yep.
Really? Okay. Anybody else remember what we're talking about here? Charlie raised his hand. He knows too. Okay. So basically what William Shatner said as he faced an eager crowd of fans waiting for inspiring words from Captain Kirk was, "Get a life, would you people?" Crying out loud, it's just a TV show. Well, for a lot of people, no, it's not just a TV show. For a lot of people it was, and still is, a bright and optimistic, even inspiring view of the future, where we weren't hung up on our differences as people, but instead treated problems as, for lack of a better word, universal. And on a larger scale, that no matter where you go and what you do, those same problems are everywhere. And that maybe we should put aside our differences and figure out how to work them out together.
Captain, earlier you stated that the original TV series was plotted as a sort of wagon train to the stars.
Yes, Mr. Spock, that's correct.
Then would you agree that it invites comparison to the American cowboys of the 1800s?
I guess so, Spock. What are you getting at?
Well, Captain, if you are comparing the crew of the Enterprise to cowboys, you are ignoring the often negative realities that accompanied them, such as the takeover of the land from the native inhabitants, to say nothing of the fact that racism was firmly in place at the time, and women were subject to stifling gender discrimination. Therefore, your assessment that the Enterprise was like the American Old West is a superficial comparison at best.
Spock, stop being so analytically pointy-eared. Pointy-eared alien. It's a TV show, it's an adventure show, not a history lesson. And since when do we know more about American history than those of us from the planet?
I have done extensive reading on the subject, Dr. McCoy. I am also well aware that, damn it, you're a doctor, not a historian.
Wait a minute. Are you stealing my lines?
I am simply pointing out the obvious, Doctor.
Are you too dumb yet? Can I get on with this?
Be my guest.
Apologies, Captain.
Thank you. It really isn't Star Trek without Spock and Bones bickering, is it? But Spock does raise an important point. It was idealistic, almost too much so. But I think that part of the reason why Star Trek endures is because it distilled all of those elements of facing the unknown with bravery and courage, and replaced those uglier elements of history with the idea that we were all welcome on the command deck with the captain. If there is one thing that Star Trek encouraged, both on the show and outside the show, was another one of our principles, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. It was Martin Luther King, for instance, who encouraged Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura, to remain on the show, despite her hesitations. She wanted to be a Broadway actress, because he felt that she could be a role model for young African Americans. Among those she influenced was Mae Jemison, the first black woman to travel in space on the Endeavour in 1992. Jemison cited the character and the actress as an inspiration in that pursuit. And undoubtedly, the role of Mr. Sulu gave George Takei a leg up that he would otherwise not have had to become the well-positioned gay rights and Japanese-American relations activist that he is today. He has received prestigious awards for his support of these causes. There is no doubt that his influence would not be nearly as great had he not been given the opportunity to represent Asian Americans on television, and to a far lesser extent, LGBTs in the media in those early years, when diversity was not only discouraged, it was vehemently opposed. And speaking of our venerable crew, what would a good space journey be without traveling at warp speed? Mr. Scott, take us to warp speed!
I can't do it, Captain. Something's wrong with the engines.
What do you mean something's wrong? We've been docked for the past week. Get the technicians and have everything looked at and said we're clear for launch. Get up here and explain yourself, Mr. Scott. Mr. Scott, is there a problem?
We've got a triple problem, Captain.
Well, how did we get rid of them last time?
We beamed them onto Klingon ships, sir.
What's the problem? Do that again.
There's new Klingon ships in the quadrant, sir.
Beam them onto the moon. That's close enough, right?
Aye, sir.
Would also not be Star Trek without our share of problems with the dilithium crystals and the engine. Scotty, did that fix the problem?
Aye, sir.
Great. Then take us to warp speed. I guess we sent them all to triple heaven with that oxygen, right? I bet Bones has something to say about that.
What am I, a trained poodle?
You know you want to say it. You had your other line stolen before. Go ahead and say
They're dead, Jim.
it. Yeah. Feel better now? Where were we? Oh yeah, so we're talking about diversity. You know, a lot of people, talking heads in this country, like to talk to a return of old values of decades past. I'm sure we're going to hear about that now that we're in full swing of an election year. We've heard the talk, family values, an old buzz phrase. I heard a lot of that growing up. I think restoring America is probably closer to current. To hear these politicians and other social commentators talk, you notice immediately that they talk about a lot of Christian values. But what they really want to talk about is how great it was when the country lacked diversity, how unintimidating the people are to them when all men, all women, all children look like a part of the idealized version of the nuclear family that they are so happy to promote and protect, enforcing the status quo. The most scary prospect when I hear people talk like that is not the inherent narrow-mindedness and tunnel vision that they brandish so proudly, though those are mighty scary to start with. It's the more magical thinking that surrounds this kind of logic. The way things used to be was great, close to perfect even. And let's recreate that, and if you don't finish the way things used to be, you do not belong. And you need to be cast out until you learn to be right. The fanatical holding on to the past is somehow a miracle cure that solves everything. It's written in the book, that's the guideline. No compromises, no apologies, no refunds, no exchanges. Having grown up in several Catholic churches, I saw that almost pathological need for sameness affected every house of worship I ever prayed in. The rigid lines drawn by church leadership were stifling to a woman with her own mind. I could never be a church leader, for instance, because women were nuns, and that was that. Nobody ever gave me a decent answer why a woman could never be pope. All the answers I got could be traced back to traditions connected with the Bible. And I thought, but isn't this an archaic way of thinking? Surely 2,000 years later, this is mere history, and in these enlightened times it's understood that women's contributions are just as valid, and therefore women were worthy of leadership. And the answer I got back was, that's just the way things were always done. Having been thoroughly frustrated, I came to the conclusion that maybe always looking to the past wasn't necessarily the right way to go about being a better person. Instead of looking to the past for answers, I would prefer to use an optimistic future to guide my actions and help me set goals, something I can be proactive about and contribute to, and that my contributions would never be disqualified for being a woman. It gives me the power to say that history does not stop at the last page of the textbook, but that I am, and we are, a part of the story. History isn't a thing that happens to other people. We should not close ourselves off from the idea that we can be counted among the greatest people in history, because if we do, it is even harder to live up to their standards. In the futuristic setting of the show, it was normal for all sorts of people to be represented and respected and accepted. Rather than having one type of person be part of the crew, or having minority-based cruiser fleets that were segregated from the main crews, everyone belonged on the same ship and worked together. That it didn't matter that what you were or where you came from. In fact, being different was rarely acknowledged. Your talents made you a valuable part of the crew, and that's what mattered. Not what you looked like or what the shape of your family was. Nobody looked to the past for validation that this was okay. And in that way, it speaks to another of our principles, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. We can encourage the greatness of others by acceptance of what they are and what they contribute. And encouraging greatness means being bold. We as a community are bold. We are not just a part of the community as a religious institution. We are also a community banded together in service of social justice. I have seen this community take part in local forums relating to the environment, to local government, to animal welfare. We contribute to the Coalition Against Rape and Abuse and the Food Bank not once a year or once every few months, but every week. I have seen this community take part in the Occupy movement and to protest the Atlantic City Rodeo. We advertise ourselves as a welcoming congregation, welcoming persons of the LGBT community. These are not the actions of a timid people. These are the actions of a proactive, fair-minded body of individuals. It seems to me that these are not only the attitudes that we use, but also speaks to a sense of wonderment that exploration brings about in people involved with space travel. They touch upon this idea that there's a certain worthiness that one must have to be a traveler and explorer that bridges the gap with us in time and the travelers in this time and the travelers of Star Trek. Astronaut Michael Collins of Gemini 10 said, "When the history of our galaxy is written, and for all any of us know it may already have been, if the Earth gets mentioned at all, it won't be because of its inhabitants visited their own moon. That first step, like a newborn's cry, would be automatically assumed. What would be worth recording is what kind of civilization we Earthlings created and whether or not we ventured out into other parts of the galaxy." How profound. From someone who had seen the entire Earth from a tiny window, that if we should ever be acknowledged by beings from other worlds, that is who we are as a civilization that will be remembered. Edgar Mitchell of the Apollo 14 mission said the following: "In outer space, you develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. From out there on the moon, international politics looks so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him 250,000 miles out and say, 'Look at that, you son of a..." He finished that statement, "I will not." So even more powerful is this connection with the idea that social justice is intertwined with the concept of space travel and of exploration. That, in the great scheme of our universe, our problems amongst ourselves are, as the oxymoron says, astronomically small. And most simply, the plaque left on the moon by the astronauts who traveled there on the Apollo 11 in July 1969. Here men from planet Earth first set upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind. Surely we want to keep the momentum of that message going. Even those who would never be called the vision of seeing Earth from far away acknowledge the profundity of the human condition as related to space travel. John F. Kennedy said the following: "We set sail on this new sea because there is new knowledge to be gained and new rights to be won, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people. For space science, like nuclear science and technology, has no conscience of its own. Whether it will become a force for good or ill depends on man, and only if the United States occupies a position of preeminence that we can help decide whether this new ocean will be a sea of peace or a new terrifying theater of war." So with this vision of space travel, of exploration, comes this unyielding feeling that we have to be better people and we must strive to be better people. I know, given my own bent toward cynicism, these quotations could be dismissed as idealistic prattle, romanticism to tug the heartstrings to make the people feel better about what at times could be perceived as a futile task and a quagmire of pork barrel spending. But remember the time frame of all of this, the first moon landing in 1969, incidentally Star Trek's last year on the air. Can you feel the sense of convergence? The feeling of life imitating art, imitating life. And why would that happen unless there was an enduring kernel of truth found in both? Our sixth principle states that we have a goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. I think that it's easy to see how these views of space travel fit perfectly into the world of Star Trek and in the UU belief system, that it would be necessary to agree as a world on how to present ourselves to the rest of the universe. Remember a few more of those opening words: to seek out new life, new civilizations. To seek out, not to conquer or subjugate or to make more like us, but to show respect for the independent web of existence of which we are a part. But in order for us to do this, we need to embrace a sense of justice. The mission of the crew is not to make people they met more like them, but rather to communicate with and to show respect for the newfound cultures they happened upon and to learn from them. Finally, as I was researching the social justice positions of the UUA for this service, I found something interesting on the UUA website, and everyone should really visit that website because there's a lot of good information about us there. I found something that's really important, and I think everyone should be aware of this. In 2009, a series of leading UU spiritual leaders produced a movie, which you can view for free on YouTube. It's called, are you ready for this? A People So Bold. I swear, I did not even know about this when I started writing this. But there's that word again, bold. It takes boldness and bravery to take action, based in dreams that are larger than life and ourselves. You may, for instance, have noticed the rocket here on the date. It's a replica of the Saturn V. It's also taller than me by a few inches. Really, there isn't that much out there that's taller than me. I think even the kids in RE will be taller than me in about 2 weeks. But the point I'm trying to make here is that our aspirations should be larger than life. That's ultimately how we changed the world: the women's vote, the civil rights movement, and putting a plaque on the moon. They were all momentous ideas that had to be bigger than one life, and in fact many lives, in order to be realized. So when we go forward out into the world this week, keeping in mind that we just landed a rover on Mars, the Curiosity. Anybody get a chance to see this? Yeah, I was asleep because I'm just too old to stay up late. Remember, your dreams should be bigger than life, because that and the work of thousands of individuals working together brought us to this moment and will bring us greater things in the future, hopefully to not only the final frontier, but also the goal of a world community.
Thanks, Lauren, for bringing your considerable energy to this talk and to the congregation as a whole. I never realized just how much I might have been indoctrinated by Star Trek as a 8-year-old, 9-year-old. How much of it I brought on, but you're right. I'm very appreciative of what you're. Never thought how much Star Trek might have had to do with it, how much.